The corporate world is in a state of absolute meltdown, and the shockwaves are hitting the highest floors of Microsoft's headquarters with the force of a digital hurricane. Satya Nadella is reportedly in a total rage because in just the last 30 days, we have witnessed an unprecedented mass departure that no anyone in the tech industry ever thought was possible. 200 of America's Fortune 500 firms have just officially ditched Windows, migrating their entire corporate infrastructures to alternative operating systems in a move that has wiped billions in projected licensing revenue off Microsoft's balance sheet almost overnight. We are talking about the giants of industry, including massive banking institutions, global logistics firms, and retail conglomerates that have decided they can no longer tolerate the direction Microsoft is taking with Windows 11. This isn't just a minor corporate disagreement. It is a full-scale insurrection against the forced AI integration, the constant data harvesting, and the increasingly unstable nature of an operating system that feels more like an advertising platform than a professional tool. Today we are looking at why these 200 companies made the jump all at once, the secret meetings that led to this mass exodus, and why the CEO of Microsoft is reportedly lashing out at his executive team as the Windows monopoly crumbles in real time. If you think your Office PC is safe, you need to listen closely, because the very foundation of corporate computing just shifted forever. To understand why Satya Nadella is so incredibly furious, you have to realize that the Fortune 500 is essentially Microsoft's lifeblood. While home users provide a lot of data, it's the massive enterprise contracts that keep the lights on and the stock price climbing. For decades, Microsoft lived by the rule that businesses would never leave because the cost of switching was too high. They thought they had these companies trapped in a cycle of eternal upgrades. But in the last month, that arrogance has come back to haunt them. The breaking point arrived with the latest round of mandatory Windows 11 updates, which introduced even more intrusive telemetry and the controversial recall feature. For a company handling sensitive financial data or proprietary trade secrets, an operating system that periodically takes snapshots of everything on the screen is not a feature. It is a massive security liability. When Microsoft refused to give these firms a way to completely and permanently strip these features out of the enterprise versions, the firms stopped asking and started leaving. The sheer speed of this transition is what has caught the entire tech world off guard. 30 days to move 60,000, 80,000, or even 100,000 workstations per company? It sounds impossible, but these firms have been preparing in the shadows for months. They've been testing robust Linux distributions like Red Hat and SUSE, as well as specialized cloud-based environments that make the local operating system almost irrelevant. In many cases, these firms are moving to a thin client model, where the actual work happens on secure, private servers, and the desktop at the employee's desk is just a simple, lightweight portal. And the best part for them? None of those portals need a paid Windows license. We are seeing a total rejection of the software-as-a-service model that Microsoft has pushed so aggressively. These companies are realizing that they would rather pay for their own developers to maintain a free system than pay a tribute to Microsoft for a system they no longer control. Inside the walls of Microsoft, the atmosphere is described by insiders as nothing less than chaotic. Satya Nadella has built his entire legacy on the cloud-first, AI-first strategy. But this strategy has backfired because the very customers he needs to court are the ones most terrified of how their data is being used to train those AI models. If you are a top-tier law firm or a pharmaceutical giant, you cannot risk your sensitive documents being fed into a neural network that might later leak fragments of that data to a competitor through a chatbot. The trust has been completely shattered. Reports suggest that Nadella had a series of high-level meetings where he demanded to know why the sales teams couldn't stop these departures. The answer he got was something no CEO wants to hear. The product itself has become the obstacle. This move by 200 firms represents a massive shift in the power dynamic of the tech industry. For the first time in history, the buyers are telling the supplier what the rules are, and the supplier is finding out they aren't as indispensable as they thought. The financial fallout of losing 200 Fortune 500 clients in a single month is almost impossible to calculate. Beyond the lost license fees, there's the loss of the entire ecosystem. That's hundreds of thousands of users who will no longer be using Microsoft Teams, no longer using OneDrive, and no longer looking at ads in the Windows Start menu. It is an ecosystem collapse. The primary beneficiary of this rage-filled exodus has been the Linux enterprise sector. For years, the Linux on the desktop conversation was dismissed as a hobbyist dream. But when you have the resources of a Fortune 500 company, you can make Linux do whatever you want. These firms are building their own custom, hardened versions of Linux that are stripped of all the bloatware, all the tracking, and all the unnecessary visual fluff. They are creating environments that are lightning fast, incredibly stable, and, most importantly, completely private. The employees are reporting higher satisfaction because their computers no longer reboot in the middle of a task to install a quality update that adds a weather widget they never asked for. Microsoft was reportedly so desperate to stop this that they offered some of these firms $0 licenses for the next 3 years just to keep them on the platform. Essentially, Microsoft was willing to give the software away for free just to prevent the statistics from looking as bad as they do. But even that didn't work. These firms realized that the cost of Windows isn't just the license fee, it's the cost of the hardware needed to run it, the cost of the security breaches it invites, and the cost of the lost productivity when things go wrong. They decided that even for free, Windows 11 was becoming too expensive to maintain. This isn't just a win for privacy, it's a win for sustainability. Many of these companies were facing a massive bill to replace perfectly good hardware that didn't meet the arbitrary system requirements for Windows 11. By switching to Linux, they've saved billions in hardware costs, extending the life of their current machines by nearly a decade. This move is being praised by environmental groups and shareholders alike, as it shows a level of fiscal responsibility that was lacking during the era of the mandatory Microsoft upgrade cycle. Is this the beginning of the end for Windows as we know it? If 200 of the most powerful companies in the world can walk away in 30 days, what's stopping the next 200? The network effect that kept Windows alive is starting to work in reverse. As more firms leave, it becomes easier for others to follow. Software vendors are now rushing to ensure their tools work perfectly on Linux because they don't want to lose their biggest customers. The app gap that once protected Windows is closing at an incredible pace. Satya Nadella's rage is arguably directed at the wrong place. If reports are true, he is blaming the implementation of the strategy rather than the strategy itself. But the reality is that users, both corporate and individual, are exhausted. They are tired of being treated like a crop to be harvested for data. They are tired of their tools changing every 2 weeks for the sake of engagement metrics. These 200 firms didn't leave because they hate Microsoft. They left because they need to get work done, and Windows was getting in the way. The ripple effects are being felt in the labor market too. There has been a massive surge in demand for Linux system administrators and enterprise architects who specialize in open-source migrations. The skill set required to manage a modern corporate office is shifting overnight. This is creating a new generation of IT professionals who aren't beholden to a single vendor's certification path. It's an opening up of the industry that we haven't seen since the early days of the internet. So where does Microsoft go from here? Some analysts suggest they might try to open source parts of Windows or create a truly empty version of the OS for enterprise customers that has zero tracking and zero AI features. But would that be enough to win back the trust of the Fortune 500? Trust is much easier to lose than it is to regain. When a company as large as a global bank decides to spend the millions of dollars required to migrate its infrastructure, they don't just switch back because a salesperson offered them a discount. They are gone for good. The loss of these companies also means a loss of influence. Microsoft used to dictate the standards for how documents were shared and how systems communicated. But as these firms move to open standards, Microsoft's ability to set the rules for the rest of the world is evaporating. We are moving toward a more decentralized, more interoperable future where the operating system is just a quiet background player rather than a loud, intrusive partner. For those of us at home, this is a signal. If the biggest, most conservative, most risk-averse companies in the world are comfortable leaving Windows, then the alternatives are clearly ready. You don't have to be a tech genius to see which way the wind is blowing. The mass exodus of the Fortune 500 is the ultimate proof that the monopoly is no longer absolute. The power is shifting back to the user, and it feels like the start of a completely new chapter in the history of personal and professional computing. Looking ahead to the next few months, expect more damage control from Microsoft. We will likely see glossy marketing campaigns emphasizing their commitment to privacy, and perhaps even a softening of some of the most controversial features in Windows 11. But for the 200 firms that have already left, those are just empty words. They've already seen behind the curtain, and they didn't like what they saw. The rage in Redmond isn't just about lost money, it's about the loss of control. The world's biggest software company is finding out that you can only push your customers so far before they find another way. One of the most interesting aspects of this story is how quietly it happened at first. There were no big press releases from the companies involved. They didn't want to alert Microsoft while they were mid-migration for fear of having their support cut off or their licenses audited. It was a silent migration that only became apparent when Microsoft's internal dashboard started showing hundreds of thousands of active Windows seats simply going dark. Imagine being the analyst at Microsoft, responsible for tracking those numbers and having to be the one to tell Nadella that his enterprise empire is shrinking by the hour. These companies also took their partner companies with them. In the corporate world, if a major bank switches to a new platform, every law firm, accounting agency, and consultant that works with them has to ensure they are compatible. This is creating a massive secondary wave of migrations that is likely even larger than the initial 200 firms. It is a true grassroots rebellion from the top down. The corporate ecosystem is evolving away from the proprietary model faster than anyone thought possible. Security experts are pointing out that this might actually make these companies much harder targets for cybercriminals. By moving onto their own custom Linux builds, they are moving away from the monoculture of Windows. When every company in the world runs the same OS, one single exploit can hit everyone at once. But by having 200 different, customized, and hardened versions of software architectures, the surface area for a global attack is greatly reduced. This is a move toward a more resilient and diverse digital infrastructure. The impact on Microsoft's AI dreams is perhaps the most devastating part of this total collapse. Microsoft's plan was to use all of that enterprise data to train their industry-specific AI models. They wanted to be the brain of the corporate world. But you can't be the brain if you don't have access to the data. By moving to private, internal systems, these firms are effectively starving Microsoft's AI of its most valuable fuel. This puts Microsoft at a massive disadvantage compared to other AI players who don't rely on being the operating system provider. The rage being felt by the leadership at Microsoft is a clear indication that they know they have made a strategic error of historic proportions. They thought they could monetize the desktop in the same way they monetize a social media feed, but a desktop is a tool for work, and work requires a level of focus and privacy that their current model simply doesn't provide. This 30-day window will be remembered as the moment the corporate world finally said no to the encroachment of big tech into their private business operations. What we are seeing is a return to a best-of-breed approach. Instead of one company providing everything from the OS to the browser to the Office suite, companies are picking the best tool for each specific job. They are choosing Linux for the OS, open-source tools for development, and specialized, private cloud services for their data. This unbundling is the exact opposite of what Microsoft has spent the last decade trying to achieve. It is a total reversal of the one-stop-shop philosophy that has dominated the industry until now. As the news of this mass exodus continues to spread, the pressure on other CEOs and IT directors will become immense. They will be asked by their boards of directors why they are still paying millions for a platform that their competitors have successfully abandoned. The safety of staying with Windows is gone. In fact, staying with Windows is now starting to look like the risky move. This is a fundamental change in the perception of the brand, and it is something no amount of marketing can easily fix. The tech industry is at a crossroads, and it's being driven by the very people who write the biggest checks. The era of the unchallenged Windows monopoly is ending not with a whimper, but with a roar of corporate fury and a massive shift toward open, transparent, and user-controlled software. Satya Nadella might be raging today, but the rest of the world is watching closely, realizing that for the first time in a generation, there is a real choice. And as those 200 companies have shown us, that choice is increasingly to move away from the window and into the open air of digital independence. Witnessing this massive shift is a reminder that even the most powerful entities can be held accountable when they lose sight of who they are supposed to serve. Microsoft forgot that Windows was a tool for the user, and they tried to turn it into a tool for themselves. The Fortune 500 hasn't just ditched an operating system. They've sent a message that will define the next 20 years of technology. Freedom, privacy, and control are not just buzzwords for enthusiasts. They are the functional requirements of a successful modern business. And if Microsoft can't provide them, someone else will. The explosion of interest in alternatives is just getting started, and the 30-day window that shook Redmond is only the first chapter in a much larger story of digital reclamation. Stay alert, keep your system secure, and remember that your computer is your tool, and you have every right to demand that it stays that way. The corporate world has spoken, and the message is loud and clear. The age of the arrogant monopoly is officially over.